My name is Waylon Martin with Bodybuilding.News. Today we are going to be discussing a topic of how much bodybuilders take. This is not going to be about, this is part one, so it's not going to necessarily be about insulin, HGH, site enhancement oils, peptides, all those other things. We're just today going to look at the most basic compound, which is anabolics, and the spectrum that falls within anabolics, anabolic steroids, that is. A lot of people know that I am friends with a lot of pro bodybuilders, or at least associates with a lot of pro bodybuilders as well. I've worked with a number of them. I've helped them with cycles. I've analyzed cycles that others have given them as well. I've helped a lot of amateur guys as well. So consequently, I have a pretty expansive view of what these guys are taking at each level and why. The thing that people forget about these guys is the level of talent. And talent can be defined a number of ways. One could be, okay, yes, just their response to anabolics, their response to supplements, etc. But the other can be a different type of way it's measured, in that your health response. Because as Craig Titus once said, the best bodybuilders are the ones who can take the most drugs with the least health impact. Often people assume these guys have very well thought out cycles that they've put a lot of time and effort into, but really a lot of these guys are just so gifted that even taking a less than optimal cycle, they're still going to be better than a guy on an optimal cycle just because of their genetic capacity alone. And so often they graduate into the professional ranks without being fully prepared about what they need to take, what they need to do to be truly competitive. You'll notice this a lot more with the lighter weight guys, the bantams, anything below middleweight really, just because these classes are a lot higher turnover rate. And so you have a lot of younger guys that haven't been competing very long but are very talented, so they're able to win the class with relative ease. Then they get bumped up into that 212 class where they have to make up for 50 pounds and they don't know what to do. And it's not necessarily their fault. They simply just graduated too early into the IFBB pro ranks. Another misconception is the actual amount these guys take, or that they're taking super complex stuff. Yes, some guys are taking a buttload of anabolics and gear, okay? But some guys are taking surprisingly little, astoundingly little, especially when you consider the fact that there's guys in the NPC, for example, that are killing themselves, taking as much as the human body can, and they're barely breaking the top 10. I have friends who have done this. That's why I'm comfortable saying. It's just important to remember that cycle does not matter. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. I've seen guys in the NPC take the exact same cycle as guys in the IFBB, and they get two totally different results. And that guy in the NPC likely could have gotten similar results if he had just had a more optimized cycle, optimized to his personal system. But because he was just doing some blanket system that he saw someone else do and he thought it would work, it didn't happen that way. He ended up getting last. At the IFBB level, the amount of anabolic use generally goes up with the tiers of contest. So, okay, at the Europa, for example, you're going to have guys taking just as much as guys at the Olympia. There's going to be a few guys there taking just as much as the Olympia. However, there's going to be a few guys that aren't taking as much. They're going to be taking possibly less. I've seen guys compete at Europa competitions, for example, or that Europa tier 4, tier 3 type show, having not even done an off-season cycle, only doing an on-season cycle going into that contest. However, if you really want to optimize it, you want to have both an off-season and an off-season cycle. But that just goes to show you some of these guys aren't even on steroids year round. They're not even cycling, they're just completely off of substances. However, as I've seen anecdotally, beyond this level, their placings begin to suffer because the size and the mass required, it just ups at the higher tier of competitions. And Arnold, for example, is very competitive, but a show like the Olympia, all bets are off. And this is understandable and possibly validated since you're competing for the title that represents the pinnacle of our sport. There's no standard set. All these guys are individuals and they're all doing their own cycles based on their own logic. And that because of that, we get a lot of different types of styles and cycles. And we've also, at varying levels of success, get guys doing completely opposite things, getting the same type of results. There's more than one way to skin the cat. For example, I've seen a guy win a Europa tier contest that uses a base of 1 gram testosterone year-round minimum. That is a minimum. As well, I've seen guys win those Europa contests that are coming off in the off-season for a little while, if not the entire off-season. However, as you graduate into those higher levels, it gets more competitive and you have to take more gear. That's something that goes with it. And keep in mind, it's not like these guys have magical compounds as well. One time I explained what one of my friends was taking to a mentor of mine, and it was a lot of steroids. And my mentor said, if he's taking that much, how much is Jay Cutler taking? And I thought that was a great point because throughout your bodybuilding career, we're always going to be incrementally increasing the doses. This is as to shock our system. And because of that, we want to start off as low as possible. For example, my first cycle was a very small amount, and I had probably my biggest reaction to it, and it was about a half a gram of gear total, multiple compounds. However, as we continue to cycle, our sensors, etc., even with rotating off, get worn and they get tired. So by giving them this break and by changing compounds, that allows our system to get shocked in a way, and we react more to the anabolics that we're taking. And this is another thing many people don't realize some pros are doing. Many pros will actually just mix a cocktail of their anabolics, shake it up and put it in together. They don't even necessarily know what that is. This sounds crazy to some people, but there's multiple people I've heard of doing this. And what this does is, in theory, because you don't know what it is, you're changing the amounts all the time, and you're using different vials, etc. This is constantly shocking the system with different varying anabolics that are going to hit those sensors with different affinities. And so this goes to show you that it's not even necessarily logic and rhyme and reason that goes into these guys' cycles. The number one thing is talent. That is the determining factor in this. Your talent and your capability and reaction to these compounds. And so people will try to belittle guys' efforts by attributing all of their gains, etc., to drugs. The fact is, if you don't have the genetics to be competitive at the top tier of this sport, no drug, no compound is going to get you there. You can polish a turd, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be a turd.